The great news about this webinar is that I think we've got 5 slides total. We really wanted this to be more of a discussion, sharing of our experiences, answering your questions, and most importantly, talking about the practical aspects behind enterprise service management. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So my name is Erica Flora. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Beyond20. A bit about my story. I am a microbiologist turned project manager who, gosh, more than 20 years ago, got the opportunity to lead an enterprise transformation before digital transformation was cool. And I was like, I don't know what this is, but this is so much fun. I absolutely love it. And I want to do this the rest of my life. And so I helped with selecting of technology platforms, rolling them out, and actually helping organizations with transformation. Did this several times as an employee. And then 16 years ago, started Beyond20, and that has really formed the DNA of who we are as a company, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But without further ado, I'd love to pass the mic over to David Crouch.
Thanks, Erica. Great to be here today. I'm David Crouch, Senior Advisor at Beyond20, coming to you today from Baltimore, Maryland. And, I've been at Beyond20 now going on 7 years, doing consulting, teaching a lot of classes, helping out with a lot of ServiceNow implementations. Before coming to Beyond20, I spent almost 20 years at Johns Hopkins, both on the university and the health system side, doing just about everything you could do in the IT service management space, including rolling out ServiceNow when I was there, being on that team. One of the things that I really enjoy is that even though my background is in IT, I really got a chance over the years to see how the concepts of service management really applies to not just IT, but to the whole organization, and how that can really, fundamentally change the way an organization works, change the way people behave in the organization. So I'm super happy to be here to speak about this. And now let me turn it over to Ron Vickery.
I'll go ahead and dive in, David. So I don't think I'm fooling anybody when I tell them I'm based in Boston, that feel like I would need this scarf on, but we are having a fireside chat here today. So thanks to everyone who's joined us to talk about this great topic. I've been at ServiceNow for roughly 6 years, but close to 20 years in the technology space, really all focused in customer experience solutions. So about 4 years ago, I moved within the organization, working across all industries, to really focus in on our public sector or government accounts, healthcare and higher education clients. And now my customers are citizens and soldiers and patients and businesses and other agencies, government agencies, all of which are the same. As I found many of the common themes across customer experience in the commercial space. And so excited to be at ServiceNow to see the platform be able to be used to bring real value to society. We're expanding into things, delivering hurricane and humanitarian relief with the platform as part of that solution, helping citizens get their social services, helping patients get care faster by keeping hospital operations up and operational. So I'm honored to be a part of these and other examples of really bringing that value to our customers. So thanks for being here with us today.
So a little bit about Beyond20. Like I said before, we were founded in 2006. With the mission of changing work life. We deeply care about that. And in fact, our name Beyond20 comes from a Gartner research study where they looked at when mission critical systems and organizations fail, what that root cause was. And they found that actually only 20% of the time they were able to trace those major work stoppage kinds of failures back to hardware and software, that actually 80% of the time they were able to trace it back to failure on the people side and the process side. And so that's really what Beyond20 does, is helps with the people and the process side. We do that through training and equipping employees through new skills and ideas that they can bring back to the workplace. We do that through advisory and consulting, everything from assessing the current health of an organization to really mapping out the journey for improvement and helping with that actual improvement. And then the third piece, and I'm so excited that Ron from ServiceNow is here, is our technology piece. We are proud to say we are an 8A woman-owned, minority-owned ServiceNow elite partner. And this partnership has been so wonderful. And with that, I will turn it over to Ron to give a bit of background around ServiceNow. Some of you may not have seen ServiceNow in some time or not seen it at all ever. And it is just, it can do so many amazing things. So I will try not to steal Ron's thunder and let him talk through the next slide.
No, happy to do it. And thanks for all of that, Erica. So I hesitate to bring this up because people in our company think, hey, why reminisce so far? But I always talk about the purpose of our company and really how it started with our founder, Fred Luddy. He really started building technology just to make people's lives easier and better. And what that ended up doing is resulting in a platform that initially was used predominantly for IT service management. But today, customers, as Erica said, customers are using, and our partners are using our platform to push way beyond IT, solving IT service problems. This amazing, agile, low-code, no-code platform is also proving to be highly scalable and highly secure. And so when you think about enterprise service management, that evolution has really been the fuel for much of this growth. And so in the fine print down here, you can see Forrester even recognizes us for enterprise service management. And in places like CRM, where we're not really known often, Gartner, we were the fastest moving entry from getting on the Gartner Magic Quadrant to getting up into the upper right-hand corner as a leader in the space. And so with partners like Beyond20, we're continuing to evolve the platform to address common needs across all industries. So it's super exciting stuff. And so great to be sharing it with you today. I'll turn it back over to you, Eric.
Fantastic. And with that, I will stop sharing slides. Amazing. So this is really meant to be a conversation. We've got a few questions we wanted to talk through, and the three of us got so excited the other day. I think we could talk for a couple of hours on this topic, but we also want to hear from you. So please type as you think of them, any and all questions that you have. We'll do our best to answer them, and we'll do our best to answer any additional questions that you have that we don't have time to get to today. So what I wanted to do was just kick it off by asking, okay, what is enterprise service management? David, you alluded to it a little bit in your introduction. How do you see it? What's your perspective there?
When I think about enterprise service management, I really think about, this whole concept of, what does it mean to have a service-oriented approach? What does it mean to have service management with everything that we do in the organization? So it's really, to me, it's about applying that service-oriented approach to just about everything we do in the organization. What does that really mean? I think for me, it really comes down to placing our customers really kind of at the center of everything that we do, helping them to get their job done. Think about it. If we don't have some sort of customer, we don't really have a reason to be. And so when I say customer here, that includes, from my perspective, that includes both external customers in many cases, but also your internal employees, because after all, they are customers as well. When I think of ESM, I also think about, well, look at all these different workflows that we have going on throughout our organization. Typically those workflows don't just stay siloed within one team or one department. They can, but typically these days you see those workflows going across multiple teams, multiple silos. So it's really about, how do we streamline those workflows, make them the most effective they can be, the most efficient they can be, to go across the organization. And then the other thing that really, comes to mind to me is when you start to do enterprise service management, you set up the possibility of collecting data and observations and insights from not just one area of the organization, but from the entire organization. So maybe something I see over here with my third-party external customer, maybe I can gather an insight over there that is going to help me to improve operations on the inside of the organization. And that is something that is fundamentally different than other more sort of atomic or micro views of service management. We're talking about doing this organization wide.
You hit David, you hit the nail on the head. I always think about the fact that every organization is ultimately out there providing a product or a service to someone, no matter what they're doing. And so everything within that organization, ultimately, whether it's IT service management or HR service, it all leads into creating an organization focused on a customer that's getting a product or a service. And so to the point you made, which I think you nailed it, is this continuation to leverage as much as you can across that process to get into the consolidation and efficiencies that come from that. So I think you hit the nail on the head. And frankly, customers have pushed us all to evolve in that way, taking our capabilities and saying, hey, I want to push over here. I want to build this out in this direction to ultimately extend what I'm doing in IT or other areas out closer to the customer. So I think you nailed it. That's a great point to bring up.
Yeah, and one thing I've been hearing from both of you, it got me thinking. David, you mentioned you come from the IT side. I actually came from the business side. That was my first transformation effort that I helped with, and then IT eventually got on board, and then so we kind of came at it differently. But I think where a lot of organizations miss the mark in talking about IT service management only and talking about ticketing tools only is you don't get the benefit of breaking down the silos across your organization. I heard this great saying, it's not about dividing and conquering the work, it's about combining and conquering in service of to our customers.
Yeah.
So with that, I'm sorry, David, go ahead.
Yeah, totally agree.
Excellent. So why is this topic so important? David, we'll let you start, and then Ron and I'm sure we'll have more to add.
Well, I mean, it's not as though enterprise service management, ESM, it's not as though this is a new concept, right? It's been around for at least, 10 or so years at least, right? But again, as Ron said, when you think about it, everybody in your organization is delivering some sort of product or service, whether you realize it or not. One of the big things that's happened out there is that, our customers, our employees are a little bit spoiled by the Amazons of the world that make everything look so simple, make everything that we do look so simple. And, that's, as that's very hard to do in the real world. But what we're trying to do is to achieve some sort of consistent approach to service management, whether that is an IT service, an HR service, facilities, you name it. We're trying to achieve some sort of consistency. And I think, it's no longer an option. From my perspective, this is no longer an option anymore. Everybody that we serve has come to expect this. One of the reasons why I think that this has gotten, a lot of increased emphasis behind it is because when you think about it, 10 years ago or so, we didn't have a lot of platforms. We didn't have a lot of technology that can truly support enterprise service management. But now we do, right? Now we do. And, if you're not there already, wake up, because we kind of need to do this. It's no longer an option. I don't know, Ron, if you've experienced something like that as well.
Yeah, and you hit on one of the key drivers. Everybody's expectations, I know mine, are so much higher these days around the types of experiences I get as an employee, as a customer, myself, as a citizen, as a patient. All of those things are at the forefront. And so with those rising expectations, then one of the other pieces that drives this is how do organizations ultimately, at the end of the day, embrace that service, that enterprise-wide approach, to do more with less, because you've got global economic pressures that are, supply chain pressures, things that are happening to compress budgets down. And then you've got to manage, how do I keep my employees engaged and satisfied in kind of what has become, in many places, a hybrid work environment. And so all of those things combined with rising expectations make this super important. And so how do you, as our customers are saying, how can you help me get value faster from what you do and help me reduce costs? And and it's not an either or, it's an and. You can do both, and that's the kind of thing we like to talk about.
Well, the thing is, reducing costs has always been a concern, I think, but we've especially, I think, seen it. I've seen it in the areas of healthcare, especially with a lot of COVID funding, going away after, towards the end of the main part of the pandemic, and even higher ed and state and local government have all been really, I think, focused, or a renewed focus on, okay, how do we get more done? How do we cut costs?
Yeah. If I can just take a minute, there's just a great example of this where an organization's addressing complexity, but also doing it kind of in phases. And so it happens to be with the largest employer in the United States, and that's the US Army. So 1.2 million employees, and ultimately they needed to improve the quality of the lives for soldiers and their families with their housing. There were mold issues that were creating, big problems for them, just maintenance and repair. And if you think about service with a purpose, sending somebody off to defend our country while leaving their family behind to struggle through how to deal with challenges, it's not what you want to do. And so what the Army did is had to take all of these individuals, these families, let them initiate requests for help, connect all the internal and contractor IT systems so that they could communicate, tie those into assets, and then deliver people to do the work. All of that coordinating. So they started with giving the families options to submit requests, and then move that into, and in the process of rolling out how to go and get the work done and dispatch people, and are moving that 27-day average fixed time down to 7 days with over 1 million cases a year. So it's just phenomenal example of taking a complex situation, multifaceted, and being able to tie it together in a single environment. So I don't know if that resonates at all, David or Erica, but I think that's just an amazing example of of the kinds of things that are driving this.
And the amazing.
Sorry, David, you go and then I'll go.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's the amazing thing is that, when you think about that, that's using IT, but it's not IT at all, really, right? It's about changing how people live, right? Changing the quality of life.
Yeah, it's 100%. So sorry, Erica, did you want to?
Yeah, I was just, there's a really good question in the chat I wanted to read for the group. And I have an initial thought, and then I'd like to turn this over to the two of you. Dustin says, when management wants to replace a legacy ticketing system with an ESM capable platform, they only still see it as a ticketing system. And I have a great question that you can ask your leaders. What I tend to ask customers is, okay, if you're thinking about moving away from your existing IT service management platform, do you want to do more of the same? Or do you see this as an opportunity to take all those digital transformation ideas, all these things that you want to be able to do for customers? Do you want to use this moment to be able to springboard into true transformation? And if you get them thinking that way, that's a game changer.
Yeah, it's spot on. That's spot on. And how do you get them thinking that way? And the way to get them thinking that way is to, every organization, as we talked about earlier, is looking to improve in a competitive global environment, and one where people get voted into office. They get elected as CEOs, the stock prices have impacted. All of those things are tied to the quality of the service and product that is delivered, and the management of costs. And so whatever, how do you change minds within an organization is really by keying in on those two items. What are the outcomes, and ultimately what will be the impact of the outcomes when delivered? And once you do that and get the organization top to bottom to see the value of that, I think that's a winning theme. So hopefully that helps as well, Erica.
Yeah, and then Dustin had a follow-up question.
Uh-oh.
So they've made a transition.
Oh,
but
it's getting hot in here. It's getting hot in here.
Right. This hat is making me very hot. It's very warm out today.
No, I love follow-up questions.
So it sounds like they've already made the transition, but it's still just a help desk tool instead of something that's enterprise-wide. It sounds like it's a matter of mindset. What would the two of you say could help with that? I would say never give up. I mean, just because that's the way that things have gone. What do you folks think?
To me, there are a couple of different things you might consider. Not knowing your organization, I don't know which one of these might work, but I can tell you back in my experience at Johns Hopkins, initially when we implemented ServiceNow, it was just a replacement for another IT ticketing system, right? But when we saw the capabilities, now this was some years ago, so there's even more to it now. But when we started to implement that, a couple of things that we noticed throughout the organization. One, there was a lot of shadow IT. Folks going out there, a large institution, folks going out there and purchasing whatever they wanted to, doing their own thing. That was a concern to us because that was very expensive. There were security implications of that potentially. So what we started to do is we started to try to invite in a lot of these high-level stakeholders. We probably should have done it even earlier, but fairly early in the process to show them, hey, here's what enterprise service management can really do for you. And then it went from that situation where we had people kind of thinking, well, that's just an IT tool, to having folks come to us and say, hey, wait a second, do you think you could do this thing for the travel office for us? Or do you think you could do this thing for the strategic office? And I think what really changed it around for us is that, somewhat by coincidence, we had a key vice president level stakeholder who wanted us to build something that did not seem to be particularly interesting at the time. It seemed to fill a very niche need, but apparently it was very, very useful. But and because that person in a key part of the organization saw the need, and because we did a good job of delivering on that, using the platform and using good concepts of service management, then we got to a point where everybody wanted us to do something. Like we had the situation where, well, there aren't enough of us to do all of these. We need to figure out how to prioritize these and how to get these done. So that was not easy to get to. But I'll say this, like, it didn't take as long as you might think. Like, it took maybe about a year of consistent work. Anyway,
Yeah.
I get too excited over these things.
No, it's and it's great. And that probably, I think cultural changes within an organization are probably the hardest part of this, getting everybody bought in top to bottom and on the same page. We go through work, as I know Beyond20 does with our clients, to help establish what are the impacts based on industry benchmarks, existing customers we see. What are the impacts, realistic co-agreed to impacts that ultimately enterprise service management can have? Because it all starts with that. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Is there a reason to go through all this that's going to be compelling and get everybody excited and be obvious? And so it starts with creating that impact to business, including things around employee retention, which is a whole topic unto itself. It's we don't need to just focus on customers, but also employees. And so making sure that you've quantified the value of what a progression can mean, make sure that that's shared and agreed upon at multiple levels. And I like what Erica said, don't give up. I have when she said that, one customer occurred to me, Doug Freeman at Department of Commerce. And so U.S. Department of Commerce, he is the CX leader in that organization, which you might not think, well, why is there a CX leader for Department of Commerce? Well, they have customers. And so one of the things that he did, which I think is just an example of not giving up, is to get extra juice out of it. Every meeting he would have, he had a cardboard cutout of a person that was meant to be a customer sitting in every meeting. And so and it was just one of his attempts, one of the many things he did to try to make the point, we're not just here talking internally, what is this person's perspective? And so I know that's a radical example, but it's an example of not giving up. And so I think you've got to change culture and do that with facts and data, but also do that by getting everybody in the boat and finding creative ways to make this important.
Yeah, and I've got another radical example around not giving up. So when I was in my early 20s, that I landed a job as a project manager for a pharmaceutical company. And one of the VPs of research and development hired me, and he said, just come in here and fix stuff. And so I took that to mean come in here and fix stuff. So, being what now I look back, young kid in my eyes, I just went to the executive team and I said, here's what's going on. Here's what we need to fix. Here's why we need a platform to help us fix all these things. And they said, cool, go do it. And I was like, oh crap, I don't know how to do any of this stuff. So I was reading at night how to implement software and then trying to tell people during the day, okay, here's what we need to do. And I'd be like, okay, step 1 is this. And they go, what's step 2? And I'm like, I'll tell you tomorrow. And it was by far the most successful transformation I've ever seen. And it was because we just didn't know that failure was an option. We just said, here's stuff that we need to fix in our organization. And we were bold and we went to leaders and we were consistent and they said yes. And we had a champion. I think it's also, this kind of alludes to your story, David, getting a champion that believes in it and sees the power of it, because they can amplify your voice and really give it more credibility, because sometimes people may hear you differently than they will hear another leader.
And I think you made a great point, Erica. When you talked about that, I know it seems, like maybe an obvious statement, but I always say that leadership is taken, not given in many cases. And so, I talk to a lot of individuals who feel like the obstacles are insurmountable to get everybody on the same page and to get executive leadership engaged. And so I think being determined, committed, and making your case, your thoughtful case is, and just not giving up is the way to bring about change. And I've seen that happen effectively so many times. But it's something that takes some creativity and crowdsourcing. Grab all the smart people around you, including external individuals, other customers, people going through the same challenge, and draw them in, because people at the end of the day want to help, I think. So.
Yeah, and if you find something that folks get excited about and can rally around, 100%. So we've got some other really great questions here. I think this discussion has spurred some really fantastic ideas and thoughts. So Corey is asking for an organization that has used ServiceNow exclusively for just ITSM, where services and service offerings tend to be focused on IT. How do you start to shift the mindset to incorporate business services and operations, and when should you attempt it?
That's a great question. And it's not uncommon. I mean, I think it's fair to say that ESM, Enterprise Service Management, is not just ITSM with, all dressed up for the opera or the fireside chat or whatever, but it goes well beyond that. But you're going to find that in a lot of organizations, they've started with ITSM because service management has been a big concept in ITSM since at least the 1980s. So what do you do about that? I would say, if you're looking internally within your own organization, try to look at some of the areas where you've heard that there may be a little bit of frustration around, maybe it's HR, maybe it's, we have a lot of frustration or difficulty fulfilling internal employee requests for whatever benefits or whatever that thing is. Look for areas within the organization that seem to be like particular pain points right now. And then I would start to, slowly build that coalition. For me, and this kind of went beyond just ESM per se, but I tried to identify about 30 or so people. There's no magic mathematical formula here, but for me, the number was 30. And I found about 30 people from around the institutions who, I trusted that they would give me real feedback. If we weren't doing a good job, they would tell me that, but they wouldn't throw me under the bus. 2, they were kind of chatty, meaning they were either in a position of authority that can make things happen, which is really what you want for sponsorship, or they talked to enough people that they could influence them with kind of their soft skills. And then 3, they were relatively well networked and connected. So they were connected to a lot of other people. And, we're talking an organization of over 179 some thousand people. after finding about 30 of those, that really helped. And again, it doesn't happen overnight, but and maybe it's HR, maybe it's legal, maybe it's facilities. It'll be different in your organization, but find one or two that are big pain points that pretty much everybody agrees on. And if you get a few of those folks to start thinking in terms of enterprise service management, they're going to make it a lot easier for everybody to start thinking that way.
Wow, that was, man, that was the walk up, David. You're on fire. That's my daughters always get on me for taking jokes too far. So
At least I'm on the hot seat.
no, that was great.
Oh my God, both of y'all.
You kind of walked everybody up to that, like here, and I love the key in on problem areas. Some examples of that we've seen just recently. So in the state of Colorado, the CIO brought together all the department leads for the different agencies and brought them together for one kind of overview and art of the possible. And so what was shared was, here's some of what's being done and the impacts being driven across enterprises using more than just IT service management. And what happened was in that meeting, there were so many people who came in and said, hey, I need a CRM. And then I asked, hey, what's a CRM mean to you? And they literally described something that's completely different and something that maybe we could solve for. So it's getting those conversations around problem areas and letting people know that there's more available than IT service management. How we facilitated that, and I'm going to use another state example, but state of Missouri actually ran a 2-day workshop where day one, they kind of did the art of the possible, come with your challenges, let's talk about these. And on day two was actually hands-on workshop. So they got to actually interact with the software, see how it functioned, that kind of thing, see that it wasn't this scary thing that was, and do that with use cases outside of IT. So lots of different ways to evolve into that. I know I took it sideways there a little bit, but something definitely to consider.
I think that's great. I think another thing that also helps with mindset is stop calling it ITSM and ESM. Just speak to the pain that your stakeholders have. What are you trying to achieve? How can I help you do it? And what they won't know is you're using a lot of IT service management concepts to help them achieve what they're trying to do.
Anybody who's heard of, who knows anything about ServiceNow knows that we're trying to evolve that conversation as well, because we've had things that we bucketed into employee service management and customer service management. And at the end of the day, it's all just providing service to address a pain, no matter who it involves. And so I love that, Erica, you're spot on.
It's kind of actually an interesting observation, having been in IT for and not just IT, but having been in the work world for a long time. I recall like implementing, big ERP systems, right? And yeah, I don't want to speak for everybody in the world, but I always felt at the end of those, like people had this big relief, like we've gotten through this big project and we've solved that problem and we're done with it, this big relief. But actually, a lot of times with ESM, I think you see something different, right? If you're doing it, reasonably well, once you've done the major thrust and you've gotten out the major, the major platform and things like that, you actually, I don't think you feel as much of this, we're done, no more of that around here. It's actually this appetite for, okay, what else can we do?
Oh, yeah.
You have to hold people back and say, oh, great, we can't do all of that tomorrow, but we'll try,
100%. State of Tennessee, and I keep bringing up these examples. When you said that, it's the perfect example of that. They started with us to literally just get systems talking to each other. And what happened was they quickly saw that we could help them solve the waiting room issue that they had for people coming in, citizens coming in seeking social services. So they ended up, HHS for Tennessee ended up taking this, creating a portal that could schedule appointments, and ultimately created a walk-up experience where they could use the same platform to come up and select on a kiosk what they needed to do, and ultimately get more information into the system faster and ultimately process people quickly. We have this video that shows they had a waiting room with, like, I think it was 400 chairs. And maybe it was a big number, lots of chairs, and they ultimately were able to bring that down to just a handful. because the waiting times were dropped so dramatically because using process and technology to help. So it didn't start as that, but it evolved into that. Like, hey, why don't we do this, this, and this? So great example, David.
Yeah, and David, you wrote a really good case study on, we do work with tribal communities too. I mean, we work with private sector, public sector, and tribes, and a tribe that we work with a lot, and hopefully they're here. Hello. Started out in IT, but tribal communities provide all sorts of different services. And so what started out as IT has turned into, hey, can we use this strategically to look at our projects and what we're selecting and how we implement them? Can we use this to, I mean, we've had all sorts of big dream conversations. Can we use this to look at our, we also provide police services. Can we use this to look at the software that's on our cars, treat them like configuration items, and build out a really cool database. We're talking about HR with them too. So it just kind of, yeah, David, there's nothing that convinces people like success. And when one group has success, then every other group is like, I want in on that. And then that becomes the other challenge of, okay, how do we manage all these requests that are coming in? Who's going to help us pay for it? Who's going to implement that kind of thing? But it's an exciting place to be once you've had the first success.
Mm-hmm.
There's a comment here that is so cool. Indy said, the way you're describing this and talking fondly about how it encompasses all the aspects of our day-to-day makes me think of it in terms of citizenship as a service. And I love seeing how ITSM can be applied to normal activities, and flipping the switch from, quote, I've raised a ticket because I can't do X, Y, and Z, to what's much more exciting. I need to support, or I need support to carry on what I need to do, so that this aspect of my existence is not affected by this other aspect in a bad way, and help me tie it all in and make it seamless. What do you folks think of that? Even though I kind of butchered the comment.
Yeah, I think you did a great job. Go ahead, David.
Well, I think if I understand it correctly here, I mean, I think that's the thing, like, maybe there are some times when we just, put yourself in the shoes of the end user, because we all are end users and customers at some point. And there may be times when I just want that one thing, this one really simple thing, and maybe a ticket is good enough for that. But quite often, right, like, we don't just want one thing. Like, we probably want this larger outcome. We sometimes think of it, because we've been trained to think of it as, let me submit a ticket or a form or something for that one thing. But we also need like 6 or 7 other things to give us that ultimate outcome that we want. And wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if, instead of putting in 6 or 7 tickets, right, somehow either we have created in advance, we've created a workflow that knows what that bigger outcome is and helps us to fulfill all or most of those things. Or even, this is crazy talk here, but talk about imagining where, you have some sort of ability to kind of intuit or predict what somebody wants. And as I'm putting in my request, could even suggest to me, hey, is this something that you were concerned about as well? Again, 10 years ago, that was conceptually possible, but in practice, like, not so much so. Like, you could probably do it, but it'd be really, really difficult to do. That's not impossible anymore. Like, that is realistic. Think of like HR stuff. I can be on a soapbox here, but think of anything like an HR. Like, typically, like, maybe there are sometimes when I want to, like, increase like my, what I want to what I want to put into my retirement account, right? Or what I want to take out of my paycheck. But quite often there are like several things I want to do. I just want to have it done like really quickly within one, I want to, really perfect world, I want to press the easy button and have this all just magically happen, right? It wasn't so easy to do 10 years ago, but these days you can say, hey, if you want to do this, did you also want to take a look at this other thing over there? Make that into the workflow. And and then you're suddenly wowed. It's suddenly, again, like using the Amazon, the Google, the iPhone, whatever, suddenly, it just becomes a lot easier and you don't have to think about those things so much anymore.
Yeah, man, David, you hit on like 5 different great top areas there. In I think the time is here and now, to the point you just made. The expectations that we talked about earlier from everyone on the experiences they have and the abilities to deliver service or receive service at the utmost, but did we have the capabilities really to deliver that in a realistic time to value way? In other words, where somebody invests and they can realize the value of what they've done. And so I think that's so important. Somebody also had me thinking earlier, the individual who mentioned the complexity of getting things done. So and then the person you just mentioned, Erica, who talked about, hey, I'm now tying this into the fulfilling of something that feels purposeful. And so it's resonating around this state of Florida example. So when Hurricane Ina came through, this was a non-ServiceNow customer in the state of Florida. The CIO there, among others, needed something to be stood up quickly to track missing people and to distribute care packs out into the public. And they were able to decide they needed help. We engaged, to be there to help, and they stood up that instance and got it running in 18 hours. And so when you think about the challenge of ultimately, delivering value and feeling like you're solving a problem that delivers purpose, these are great examples. It's not a mountain too hard to climb. There are now capabilities that make the ability to deliver enterprise service so much easier than in the past. And so I think I'm trying to use that story as a way to tie in all the themes that you hit on, because it's really I think it's a great example.
Yeah, and one thread I'm going to pull on that you mentioned, David, you kind of alluded to it with technology just having come so far in the last 10 years. And I'll kick this to you, Ron. Can you give some thought around artificial intelligence? Because we keep hearing that, like, what does that mean in reality?
Yeah, well, so, it's interesting because you can imagine everywhere, but certainly in government and other, there's a lot of, questions around artificial intelligence and can it be utilized productively and safely, et cetera. It's here, it's coming. We have customers using it today. And so I think the key is that we want to leverage what David described, and that is leverage the capabilities of AI to drive all the value that it can. And we're looking across our portfolio at the different service areas that we can impact across industry and use cases. And we're applying AI what we're calling generative AI to ultimately address problems that are and make more efficient service in those segments. So we're going across the portfolio and saying, how can we accelerate and drive efficiency using AI? And we've been doing it for a while. We started AI acquisitions back in 2014. And so this is not a new thing. This is just now it's hitting the mainstream, and technology is able to be leveraged effectively. And so what I think is important and what we think about is, how do you leverage that value, but also have proper governance around how that's managed. So we have several tenets that include, full transparency. So when someone's utilizing AI as part of our product offering, we want to be clear that they are receiving an AI response versus them wondering, am I getting a real person or not? We also want to have governance around how it's used responsibly. And so we've got a series of governance elements that really say, how can we bring this value to market, but do it safely and securely, and make sure that we're managing that tightly so that everybody will be happy with the outcome.
Excellent. And I wanted to make sure that I shared this slide, or this next slide, and we'll open it up to and answer as many questions as we possibly can. But we've helped a lot of organizations do this, moving from just ITSM, or even just skipping ITSM if you're not doing a good job of ITSM right now, and really realizing true enterprise service management. We do lots of journey mapping and discovery sessions. If you just send an email to hello@Beyond20, we will get our folks on it and have a conversation and talk through what that could look like. So With that said, there's so many good questions in here. Okay, so there's one that says, where would you position organizational change management's importance, and how high would it be on a scale of, say, 1 to 10 on breaching beyond ITSM into the broader world of ESM? And I'm seeing David, I'm seeing some thought bubbles above your head. So I'll kick this one to you.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this question. I mean, this I put it right at the top. You know, it's critical for several reasons. Two that immediately come to mind. One of the big challenges of organizations, you know, really getting behind ESM is a lot of organizations are developed around silos and fiefdoms, right? You know, if I'm working in my own department or my own team, I feel like I have a certain amount of power by having my own set of technology, by having my own set of processes. And, you know, that's not what we need anymore. You know, to be effective, we need to work across teams. So, you know, organizational change management being about the people side of change, I would say, first of all, if that's the big issue around these silos and fiefdoms, really trying to get some of your key stakeholders from across the organization involved relatively early, and even doing something like, you know, setting up a steering committee. It doesn't have to be terribly formal at first. It could be, you know, kind of, I like to use this term, minimally viable bureaucracy, so to speak, but getting people's input, getting them involved, and especially if they are resistant and they're at a high level of the organization, I really want them to be involved, because I want to make sure that they don't sour things for the rest. If I could win them over, I'm going to win everybody over. The other part of this is, you know, within the organization, you're just generally going to encounter some old-fashioned change resistance, right? It's just, to some extent, there's a certain amount of, I don't want to change things, even though I don't like them. I don't want to change things because I'm used to the way they are, right? And that's where doing things like providing training, providing workshops, understanding the journey, providing tailored communications. This is where all of that helps to get the rest of the organization. So not only your top stakeholders, but everybody in the organization, you know, on board. And it is also an area, I will admit, where I don't know that every organization understands the importance of it. You know, it's not fluffy stuff. It's not extra stuff to do. If you're not doing OCM with a major ESM transformation, you know, your chances for success go down. However, if you start to think around, I need to have people around me who have real experience in getting people over that hump with OCM, then you're going to drastically increase the chances for successful technology implementation. But beyond that, really changing the way people think about this and behave.
That's all amazing. I'll add one aspect to that, and it's a little esoteric, but I'm going to use an example. So in all that, as we talked about, you know, you hit all the key topics there, David. One of the challenging parts, and I'm experiencing it now, as a matter of fact, and so that's why it's top of mind, is the importance of developing true partnerships with organizations that are supporting your change. So developing that culture internally, super important. But one of the things I've seen, and I'm going to air a little dirty laundry here, I'm sure those on the session have experienced this yourself. I'm going through a project right now with a major national organization, and they were working with a large contractor. And one of the things that I'm noticing is that it's clear that the contractor is literally just going through the motions. And so what's the result of that is that contractor is coming out with kind of substandard work, meaning the training isn't really in the language of the customer, the documentation isn't clear, the you know, all of the change management that they're going through, it's almost like they're going through the motions and they haven't taken the time to really get to know the customer, be a true partner, and understand the vision from the customer's point of view, the day in the life from the customer's point of view. And I would just put a huge exclamation point on the importance of doing that. Finding partners that are helping you with this transformation, that really have a vested interest in you, care about the outcomes, and will get to know you well enough so that they can deliver quality change management. Because what happens if that's not done, everybody's confused. Everybody who's going through CAT testing, who's going through, trying to roll out projects, they're all confused, and it's unnecessary if you have somebody who's willing to take the time to do it right. So, David, I appreciate you letting me add that as something on the end of yours comments.
Yeah, and I'll air some dirty laundry too. I worked on several very successful transformations, and then one that was just the pits. And the organization wanted to change. They wanted to change, but they only wanted to just rush the technology, get it in as fast as possible, get people using it. But they didn't take the time to, number one, rethink how they wanted work to happen. So they built the new system just like the old system. They didn't train anybody, really include them in key decisions. And at the end of it, we got the new platform working. But I remember I was really disappointed because people started going, that old system we had was, do you remember that? That was pretty great. It's like, oh, yikes. Okay. Yeah. You got to bring the people along and use it as a time to rethink how you work and how you want to be working. Cool. So we've got some other questions. Corey is asking, so when does it make sense to use another application that is designed specifically for a process? So for example, waiting room queues versus trying to build it out within the ServiceNow platform. Ron, what do you think?
Repeat the first lead into that again, Erica?
Sure. Yeah. So when does it make sense to use another application, and then in parentheses it says COT, that is designed specifically for a process like waiting room queues versus trying to build it out within the service platform?
Yeah. There are different approaches. One of the things that we find is that we're not always rip and replace in our approach. We're taking like a wrap and renew in many cases. So if there's a system that's performing well and is purpose built and financially makes sense for an organization, then there's no necessarily need to remove that system. But what we find is when that system is talking to people, other systems, and routing processes across and outside an organization, that's where ServiceNow can really wrap and renew and make that better. So for example, we do procurement solutions that ultimately they're purpose-built, source to pay solutions and procurement solutions out there. We can do a lot of that, but what we find is we're not going to be a Coupa or an Ariba necessarily, but we can make those systems better by surrounding them. So if you have a waiting room application that's working well for you, is financially, a good choice that you want to keep in place, look at two things. One, could we surround that and make that more effective and powerful as you need to connect that service issue or that service process to other parts of the organization, send notifications, do things like that? Or if you want to talk about, hey, we're not sure it's the best, then we could look at what is it doing, and we find that we can do a lot with ServiceNow that ultimately might let you do that all on one platform. So it becomes a conversation, and we'd want to dig in on your specifics a little bit. David, Erica, how'd I do on that one? Did that resonate? Okay.
100%. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of solve the problem how best you can and use technology to continue to solve problems. But we all have different environments.
We have a challenge at ServiceNow where we go in and we tend to just, we have to resist the urge to just tell everybody everything about what we do. The better step is do proper discovery and really understand the broader vision and the steps and where you are in the journey as a customer. And at the end of the day, we want to make recommendations that are relevant for you and the situation you're in. So that's what Beyond20 does. That's what we do in partnership with them. So I think we'd love to have a conversation about that, and quickly we could determine kind of directionally what might make sense.
And practically speaking, you run into situations where we have a particular piece of technology that we're using for something. It's okay, it's not great, but we have a contract that's like for the next 2 or 3 years or whatever. So I think the real world is you run into stuff like that, and then again, without without immediately going in and saying, let's rip it all out and replace it, take a look at that and say, well, is this the kind of thing that, when this technology, does come to the end of its contract, when if you notice that the vendor for that really isn't investing a lot in improvements to that, is this the kind of thing where later on you do want to replace it? But it's probably, the first question isn't, how quickly can we replace it? The first question is, what are you using it for? Is it solving your problem? Is it cost effective?
Yeah, and then one last thing I wanted to touch on, if we can squeeze in maybe two questions, great. But one thing, Ron, that you mentioned as we were talking previously is some really cool applications on the retail side. I know we've been talking a lot about government, state and local, that kind of thing. Yeah, can you share a bit about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So many organizations are a microcosm of different industries. So like the Indian nations, and many of those have aspects. There are government agencies that act as complete marketplaces, and then the commercial tied to retail. So, pure retail, we've just seen, this broadening of the use of a true enterprise service management approach for organizations like Starbucks, who, comes to mind. They use us for the application on the phone that ultimately interacts with the public, all the way to operations in their stores. So having, coffee machines and refrigerators and things that break down, how do we get ahead of that, do proactive maintenance, manage that within the system, or reactive maintenance? And so opportunities in retail come from everything from providing customer service, call center support, et cetera, all the way through to applications on mobile to store operations. We're seeing that at 7-Eleven, where we do all of their ServiceNow as a platform manages their retail operations. And again, organizations like federal agencies also have retail components in them. So all of these industry solutions that we packaged up around public sector, healthcare, manufacturing, retail, et cetera, financial services, they're all available, and capabilities built on top of ServiceNow so that you don't have to build them out of the box. So we'd be interested in exploring those with anyone interested.
So I have one fun last question, if we can get it in maybe in the next 30 seconds. If you were to use an analogy to describe why a government, healthcare, et cetera, kind of organization needs to transition from ITSM to ESM, what would that be? An analogy that demonstrates the difference between the two and why ITSM is no longer enough. What a question, huh?
An analogy. I'll tell you one. I'll try to make it quick. When the car came out, when the automotive came out and the first Model T came out, it didn't mean that the car was perfect, right? The concept was perfect, but then how do you take and expand upon that existing car that functionally does the same thing, but could do more for you? More comfort, more safety, more distance, all of that. And so I think you asked for an analogy. I don't know if this is what you were looking for, but in my mind, the car came out. How do you make a better car? And that's what the transition from ITSM to ESM is how do you take that car and make it better, make it do more for you, et cetera. So I don't know. That's the first one that came to mind.
I would say go talk to, if you're not the COO, go talk to the COO. I was just talking to a COO for a hospital at one of my son's lacrosse games, and he was telling me all kinds of things that, gosh, if you would have changed it, you would have said, did this guy use ServiceNow? And it's like, and not just ServiceNow, but these are things that are all workflows. They're all about improving the patient satisfaction, that's the customer, but also how employees deal with it. He probably had better analogies than I could have for real world issues in the healthcare setting that needed to be solved, and that can be solved with ESM.
There are so many to choose from. I mean, so many great stories in the healthcare space around improving patient experience, clinical assets, in government around reducing websites from web portals from 18 to 1 and reducing 300 forms. These are all problem areas that we jump in and fix. So, exciting stuff. Sorry, Erica, I'm going to stop. I can just
This
go.
is great. This is great. We're 1 minute over or 2 minutes over now. So I really appreciate everyone's time. Hopefully this was really valuable. We look forward to doing something like this again and would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us.